Hello, this is a video to talk about the main points of the syllabus of your class. As you can see here, this is specific to a particular section of CISP 440, so you may be in a different class. And even if so, this video is still applicable because I am not going to go through the course-specific information or the class-specific information in this particular discussion, and instead I'll focus on everything that is common to all of my classes. So this means you still need to read the syllabus of your own class just so that you can get all the class and course-specific information of the class that you're taking. So we're going to skip course information, class information, and we'll skip all the way to professor information here. My name is Tak. My last name is Aoyong. You can just call me Tak or Dr. Tak or Professor Tak when you're in class. I prefer to have my name when you address me. So instead of just saying Professor, I prefer that you call me Tak, Professor Tak, or Dr. Tak. Just choose one. My email address is right here. It is Aoyunt, AUYUNT, without the G, because for whatever strange reason, the district has decided to only use the first 6 characters of the last name plus the first initial as my email address. But it is at arc.losrios.edu. My phone number is 916-484-8250. This will reach me in the office. If I'm not in the office to answer the phone, it will automatically go to a voicemail. And the voicemail, interestingly, is going to be, it connects to Exchange. So it will send me an MP3 file of your recording. So that's actually pretty useful. And then the next item has to do with my office. So my office is in the Diane Bryant STEM Innovation Center, which otherwise is just known as the STEM building. And it is on the 3rd floor. My room number is 316 inside the little cavity for all the faculty offices. My office hours are as follows for this semester. On Mondays and Wednesdays, it is in my office from 1:30 to 2:30. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it is from 8 to 9 in the morning. And then on Fridays, it is from 8 to 9 in the morning as well. And if you need to meet with me, we can always arrange additional meeting times. So do not hesitate to ask if you need to meet with me, but not during the time that are scheduled for this particular class. Not for this class, but scheduled for my office hour. So we can always meet up, at a different time and over Zoom if it is necessary. I prefer face-to-face, but if you need to meet with me and you cannot get to my office, we can try to arrange for a time to meet on Zoom. So this one is new. Okay, important dates those are the things that you should know about. These are hyperlinks. The academic calendar, let me just go there to show you what it is. So this is going to work every semester because from here there is a link to the semester specific calendar. So in this case we are in fall 2003, so you click on this link here and it will bring you to the fall 2023 academic calendar. In this case, it is important to know what kind of a class you are taking. All the classes that I teach this semester are full term. So you have to click on full term. And in here on this list, there are several dates that are super important. September 1st is important for 2 different reasons. Last day to return parking permit for refund, and last day to drop classes and qualify for a tuition refund. So if you, for whatever reason, is thinking about dropping a class, you probably want to make that decision by September 1st. So this way you can get your money back. September 3rd is also important for 2 different reasons. One is it is the last day to drop classes without a notation. And then the second reason is the last day to enroll in classes or to add with a permission number. So the idea is we do not want to get into the situation where you have to use a late add petition form. So we want to get everyone enrolled in classes by September 3rd. And it is also on September 3rd that you can drop a class without a notation on record. And then we skip all the way to November 14th, which is the last day to withdraw from classes with a W notation on record. And then after that, you cannot drop from a class anymore. And then we have final exams from the 8th to 14th. So those are the important dates. And if you scroll down, it also has a list of all the holidays, which is important because you don't want to come to school when the school is not going to be open. All right, so moving on to the final exam schedule. Once again, it is a hyperlink, and it works in every single semester because it is a single link. If you look at the URL, it's not specific to a semester. So in this case, you have to look up the meeting time of your class. And in this semester, all of my classes are daytime classes. So they're all going to be under here. And then you just look up the start time of the lecture. So the lab is not important to look up this table. You want to look at the lecture time to look up this table. And you want to also look up the days of the meetings. So they have quite a few options here. They have Monday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then they have Tuesday, Thursday. So make sure that you match both the start time and the days of the meetings of your class. And then the table will give you the date of the final exam and also the time of the final exam. So I will leave it up to you guys to look this up and find out what the final exam time and date are. Now for the final exams, it is going to happen in the classroom or classroom/lab that the lecture is scheduled in. So you probably need to look that up. You probably don't need to look it up because you already know which classroom you need to go to for your lectures. All right, so we're moving on to section 6. Section 6 talks about how I am going to present or deliver the learning material. So first of all, there are reading materials, and all of these are already on Canvas. So on Canvas, there are links to writings, mostly that I wrote in the past. But I keep updating those. So, whether it should be past tense or present tense is kind of like, I probably should use, present perfect tense, which is, present perfect. Okay, well, I cannot find the term to describe it. I should have said, these are the material that I have been developing. Okay, so because it's an ongoing process. So they're already in Canvas, and you're highly encouraged to read the material before as well as after a lecture. And then the lectures, in this semester, and I think in the foreseeable future, I am only going to teach in person 100%. So only these items apply because I'm not teaching in any online classes or hybrid. So with in-person classes, I may record lectures. Typically I do, okay, except when there's a technical difficulty or when I forget to click the button. In other words, it is an extra resource for you guys to utilize, but do not count on it 100%. You probably still want to write your own notes and make sure that you are not missing anything, just in case the video recording did not make it. Attendance is still 100% required, which means even though we may have lecture recordings, it does not take the place of being there in person while the lecture is being delivered live. So in other words, this is not a hybrid class. It is not a sync flex class. It is not a high flex class. This is a good old traditional in-person class. And if you think the recording is useful, and most students do, please help remind me to enable the recording at the beginning of a class because sometimes I do forget, so it is important. There are also interactive activities, especially when you're in a class that has a lab component. So the lab component refers to interactive activities that you can do on Canvas, but if you have a lab component to your class, mostly CISP 310 classes, that is in person as well. Okay, it is not designed to be done off-site or somewhere else. It is designed to be done in person. All right, moving on to section 7, regular effective contact and communication policy. So if you want to stay in touch with me, there are several ways. Coming to the lectures is mandatory, so you don't even have a choice in that particular case. But if you want to get additional opportunities to talk to me and to talk about things, the first one I recommend is to utilize my office hours in person. Because this way, if there's anything that has privacy issues, I can just close the door. And a lot of times it's better to communicate face-to-face or in person than to go through communication, electronic communication means. Now, if you cannot make it, in the office hour or when you're doing your homework, you have a question, you can also reach me by email. You can also use the Canvas messaging system, that will reach me as well. And you can also, this one is on, this is a one-way communication. I do send announcements a lot. For teaching an in-person class, I use Canvas announcements a lot. So typically, you should get those announcements in email as well. But in case somehow that is not working, then you have to actively check the announcements in your Canvas shell. The expectation of time frame, in other words, what is my turnaround time? During the week from Monday to Friday, the turnaround time is 24 hours, which is a day. And over the weekend, it's twice of that. Okay, so that means when you send me an email on Saturday, I may not get back to you until Monday. The rest does not apply. Oh, it does apply. For in-person / synchronous class, to initiate communication with the instructor, use the office hour, and you can also schedule additional meeting time. But for in-person cases, I will be actually in my office during my office hours. So all you have to do is to get to my office, and I tend to schedule my office hours either right before or right after a class to make it more convenient for students to come meet with me, except on days when I have to teach multiple classes on the same day, so I can only make the office hour adjacent to one of the classes, but not all of the classes. Section 8 has to do with resources, that can give you accommodations or, give you the approval for accommodations. So the idea is you want to get to the DSPS department, which is the Disability Services and Programs for Students program or department. And if you do get a DSPS approval for accommodations, you want to let me know as soon as possible, and at the latest about 2 weeks or about a week before the exams, because this way I can basically get ready for the accommodations ahead of time, and you will need time to schedule for resources at the DSPS department as well. So you definitely want to get things done ahead of time. And these links are the email address and also the homepage of the DSPS department. Now, this is important. I can only provide accommodations according to DSPS approved accommodations, and the instructor is available to talk about accommodation issues. So that means, during the lecture, if there is something that I can do to help with the accommodations, let me know. There are certain things I can do and certain things I cannot do. For instance, I tend to use the pointer a lot and just kind of visually point to certain things. And if somebody says, but I cannot tell what you're pointing at because I'm visually impaired, then I can be more specific and actually use my words to describe what I'm pointing at. All right, so moving on to section 9, which is a rather long section because it has to do with the expected behavior and conduct for students. And this is once again a hyperlink. So you want to go to the hyperlink, and there's a long list of your expectations of student behavior and conduct. So all of these are important, but the most important ones for me has to do with academic dishonesty and not so much plagiarism, because we don't really write paper in this class. It's really, really hard to be plagiarizing anything in this class. All right, so moving on, and there's also a guide, which is a different link. And in this link here, it's basically presenting about the same material, but it also gives you a link to the board policies, and basically these are the source documents of what the other page is describing. The other page describe things in a much more in a way that's easier to digest, and those links that I just showed you are basically legalese kind of documents, but they are very concise, and they are the definition. They contain definition of some of the terms. The instructor's policy is to be consistent with the expectations from the Office of Student Conduct, and once again we have a hyperlink. This link links to the Office of Student Conduct, and the Office of Student Conduct is the I guess a department on campus that is specifically responsible for student rights responsibilities as well as conduct. So they are also on campus. You can meet with those people in person if you want to talk to those people. The instructor, that's me, will report all cases of violations. In other words, I will leave it up to the Office of Student Conduct to sort things out. So my job is simply to observe and report if necessary. The minimum consequence of a violation is a score of 0 assigned to the assessment that is in violation in case of academic dishonesty. In the case of violations that are not of the nature of academic dishonesty, just such as bullying, the instructor can choose to remove the involved people from one or more class meetings. So if you read the other documents that are linked, you will find out that, the instructor can actually tell a student to leave a classroom if that student is being disruptive or otherwise violating the code of conduct. All right, section 9.1 talks specifically about academic honesty / integrity. It's looking at things from a positive perspective. The basis of academic integrity policies is that the grade of an individual, we call that person X here, as a variable, and since we're all in computer science classes, we know what a variable is, should reflect the academic performance of X and X alone. Furthermore, the performance assessment should also be conducted in a way that is consistent with the peers of X, which means we have certain types of restrictions, and in an assessment, and everybody should play by exactly the same rules. So that's the premise of what academic honesty / integrity means. Most assessments include rules that are applied consistently to all participants. For example, an assessment such as an exam may allow the use of any handwritten or printed content on paper, but not electronic devices. Another assessment consistency is the start and end time of an assessment. Other rule examples include the start time, end time, and answer collection method of an assessment. So what this means is I cannot just say, oh, since this person arrives late in an exam, I'm going to give this person some extra time past the end time of the exam. That is not going to happen. Another example, according to these examples, is if the rule says, we can only be bringing in handwritten or printed content on paper, and somebody says, but I got everything on my iPad, I cannot allow the iPad to be used in the assessment because everybody has to play by exactly the same rules. Those rules will be reviewed about a week before the exam, so everybody should know the restrictions of the exams. All right, so we're going to move on to non-integrity conduct expectations. So once again, refer to the college student conduct webpage for a long list. The bottom line is a class, virtual or in person, should be an environment that is free of elements that impede teaching and learning. In this context, the elements refer to human behaviors. This is a list of such behavior. It's just an example, so the list can be a lot longer than these examples. Chatting it happens a lot, and most of the time it's not because people want to disrupt a class. It is mostly because someone may not be paying attention when I'm talking, or have something that is not clear. Well, that may be my fault of not presenting content in a clear way. But instead of raising the hand and asking me, a person may be asking a student next to that person, and that will basically start a chat. So chatting is not very friendly to the entire class, because people who are around the person who's chatting, or the people who are chatting, is going to be disrupted, because it's really basically impossible to chat in a way that other people cannot hear. So that's why chatting is on the list. Devices, sometimes people forget to turn off their phones during class, and when they get a text or when they get a phone call, it rings, and that can be a disruption as well. Most of the time it's not intentional. It is just something that happens. I'm not really strict about chatting and devices in terms of referring people to student conduct, because it just happens. Okay, but I will give people some warnings and tell them, okay, your phone, my phone just beeped me because of a calendar item. So it does happen, and I'll just kind of remind people, oh, okay, your phone has been, beeping several times already. Can you turn off the notification or the speaker of the phone? Other sources of disruptions, can include a variety of things. Okay, some people may bring in their pets. Okay, and in this case, when I say pets, I'm not referring to support animals or working animals that are officially allowed on campus. I'm simply referring to a pet, so that can cause some disruptions. Bullying is not a disruption. Bullying is actively trying to do things to other people, and that's definitely a no-no in my class. And then threatening other students is also something that I will not allow in class. Now, I cannot know about some of these things happening, so if you are aware of these things happening, you can let me know, and I will keep your identity private. I would not disclose it to the rest of the class, but I will basically have to report the incidents to student conduct, because none of this should be happening in the class. So this is just a kind of quick look at each particular item. So specifically with bullying and threatening another student, these things they happen, interestingly, a lot more often with classes that are taught online. When people are in a Discord channel and they start to rant, some of those activities fall into bullying, and some of those activities will fall into threatening. In an in-person class, they do not occur as much. Now, it doesn't mean that with an in-person class, there would be no online bullying and online, threatening, because I know, people use, set up their own Discord servers and whatnot, which is great. Okay, I really like, the fact that students are communicating and they're working, together. They're studying together. However, if on those Discord server, somebody is being bullied or somebody is getting threatened, I still have to do something about it, because it is still within the context of a class. Section 10 talks about attendance and absences. So once again, we got a few links here. This is a link to the college and academic regulations. And let me see where it goes. Okay. So in here, it talks about attendance. So you want to look at this link specifically because it talks about, what absences are and what happens when people have excessive absences. Specifically, read the district's attendance requirement. Once again, we have another hyperlink here. This is a PDF, and these are the policies, district-wide policies that basically set up the baseline of what we expect in terms of attendance. The district or college has no policy regarding what absences are excused. This prompts certain opinions from certain students, and once again, it is a hyperlink. And this is just an article from the American River Current, which is a student newspaper. And they, in this particular article, they collect opinions from students. So you can read about that too if you want to. So attendance can be tracked by a variety of methods. The idea is every student should be present and on time in every single class meeting. That is the expectation. In order to succeed in a class, that is something that will help. In an in-person class, this means that being late can be counted as absent. Not paying attention to the attendance instruction can be counted as absent, which means when I am taking roll, okay, and when I use a method to take roll and a person is not paying attention and therefore did not participate or do the activity for roll taking, that can be considered absent. Each student is responsible to arrange time and other resources to attend lectures and labs online without interruption and so on. This part only applies to online classes and not so much with an in-person class, because in an in-person class, if the schedule says that you have a lab section and it is from this time to this time, I assume that you have allocated the time to be there in the lab in person to do the activity. And unless I say something otherwise, there will be lab activities if there's a lab section. All right, so the question is, why are we being so strict about attendance? Attendance is positively correlated with performance and success in a class. While attendance by itself does not guarantee academic success, it is a necessary component. Over the years, over 23 years or so, I can tell you that I can see a lot of examples of people who do not, who have a lot of absences, so they're borderline excessive because the excessive ones are already dropped from the class. So I can tell you that most of those students do not end up with a very good grade. So, one thing about having a good attendance is it really is for you. It's not for me. It is for the student taking a class. Specific to in-person or synchronous online classes, attendance is taken using specific means as mentioned by the instructor. So typically what I do is in the middle of a lecture at some random time, I am going to say, oh, by the way, there is this Canvas activity. It will ask you for a password, and then the participation of this activity counts as roll taking. So what that means is you probably want to have your cell phone ready to participate. Typically I would also give, I would present a QR code when I have time to prepare for the QR code. But for the most part, if you can sign in to Canvas, the activity will be presented, at a certain time, and it will be taken away, like 10 minutes after that. And then during that 10-minute window, people can go in, do whatever is needed to count as interaction. And that's how I take role in my in-person classes as well. But I also reserve the right to take role in other forms as well, like you're passing along a sheet of paper or something along that line. All right, so the question is, what if somebody has excessive absences, and what does it mean anyway? So the district's definition of excessive absences is 6% or more absences. In a 16-week class, which is a full semester class, each week has more than 6% already. So that means a total absences that is equivalent to 1 week of lecture and or lab activities is already considered excessive. So in our case, because I'm teaching either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday classes this semester, so that means missing 2 days, having 2 absences is already bumping over the excessive threshold. So that is by definition what is considered excessive. What about excused absences? Well, you probably remember earlier that we said that there's no policy regarding what is considered absences. So you might, for those of you who just graduated from high school policies are different because they are using Title II to determine the code of what can be counted, what has to be counted as absences and whatnot. But in a community college, we are falling under Title V, which is a different ed code, and in that it really does not specify anything about what is considered excused absences. All right, so things do happen in life, and I understand that sometimes people just cannot make it to class. They may be sick, they might have a job interview, and so on. So what is going to be excused? I mean, so instead of having me to really evaluate, what is excused and what is not excused, I would just give everybody an allowance that is more than what the excused absences threshold is. So each student can be absent according to roll-taking mechanism up to 3 times before qualifying as excessively absent and dropped from class. So that means the 3rd absence is still not considered excessive, but the 4th one will be. So everybody can afford up to 3 absences in the semester, whereas the district policy basically says the 2nd absence is already considered excessive. So this is a big bump up in terms of allowances of how many classes people can miss. I think I am going to remove remote participation. So this way, so I'm not allowing people to use remote participation to substitute for in-person participation. So section 10.5.2 is going to disappear from the syllabus as soon as I get to remove that. And then consideration of absences, and this is added. An absence may be excused at the discretion of the instructor. Okay, this is just me typing incorrectly. So I kind of give myself the discretion of excusing absences, even though earlier I said no, there are no excused absences. So the college does not specify what can be absent, what can be excused. Basically nothing, no reason has to be excused. Okay, that is the district and the college policy. But I'm giving myself, I'm giving you, and basically, I can qualify certain absences as excused. Let's see here. Most cases are not excused and handled by the aforementioned absence allowance. The only case that is significant applies to exam. The instructor expects each student to plan ahead and make sure that he or she does not miss an exam, nor to arrive late. This may include, but it's not limited to, setting an alarm to wake up on time, and so on. So these are the things that you can do to make sure that you are on time. However, people can be sick. Okay, I understand that sometimes people become sick and they cannot get to an exam, and instead of giving those people a big flat 0, just because they're sick, that would not be very kind, right? So Sickness can potentially be excused, but there are conditions attached to the excuse as well. So the one thing is inform the instructor prior to the exam start time in a reasonable time frame. In other words, if you're sick and you cannot make it to an exam, okay, tell me before the start time of the exam. Okay, that is the first qualification. Because if somebody tells me afterwards, I don't think I can count it as an excuse. And then furthermore, I need a doctor's note prior to the exam. The doctor's note must meet all of the following criteria. Now, the doctor's note is important because, if there's a sickness serious enough, to miss an exam, it probably needs to be brought to the attention of a doctor. And then you can ask, the person who has the sickness can ask the doctor for a doctor's note. The doctor's note should be on paper because, I will request to see the doctor's note on paper with the letterhead of a licensed medical facility, including contact information of the doctor, so that I can call the doctor and, if necessary, most of the time I don't do that, but if necessary, I can call the doctor. It has to be dated, and on that thing, it will also specify a range of days to be excused. So this is applicable to a sickness that occur sometime before an exam. So this way, I get the paper that says, so and so is sick, and this condition will require X many days to be excused from school. So I need to have that. At the discretion of the instructor may exempt time-sensitive criteria if the onset of the sickness is of an acute nature, such as an acute appendicitis. The doctor must note that the medical condition is of an acute nature, and this means you can get a doctor's note after the fact because, well, guess what? You cannot schedule these things to happen. And when it does happen, you probably do not have time to contact me and go I'm having an emergency situation here and I cannot make it to the exam. No, you'll be busy getting to the ER and getting treated. So I do understand that occasionally you cannot meet the requirement of informing the instructor prior to the exam start time in a reasonable time frame. I do understand that. But in those cases, they only apply to acute cases of some kind of sickness. And in the event that the instructor excuses a student from taking an exam on the scheduled date and time, the instructor may choose to administer an exam that is different from the one administered on the scheduled day and time. All right, so moving on to grading. What is being assessed? Okay, that really is very important to ask in any class, okay, because you want to know what your professor is assessing you. So in this case, I really do not ask about prior knowledge and recall. I mean, it's already assumed. Why? Because all of the exams are open book and open notes, so there's no need to memorize things. And since it is open book and open notes, I do not feel that that aspect should be assessed. There should be no points associated to, oh, I know where to find that definition, and the definition is blah. Okay, so there will be no point values associated with prior knowledge and recall. So if that is not being assessed, what am I assessing? I'm assessing whether people can analyze and whether they can think in a critical way. So this particular dimension quantifies the ability to understand and break down a question into components that correlate with the correct symbols, definitions, techniques, procedures, and concepts introduced in class. It is making a connection between what the question is asking to what is already taught in class. That is 11.1.2. So there will be point values associated with just being able to a demonstration that the question is understood, and then what is being asked in the question, you can make a connection to the concepts being taught in class. The next one is also very important, because just knowing that this question has to do with this concept, and also that concept is only a part of being competent in the material. So the next thing is, can you apply that? Can you apply what you have learned in the class to solve the problem? So most of the questions that I ask in an exam are of the nature of problem solving. You have this, you're supposed to accomplish a particular objective, and then the question is, okay, show me how you can do this. And the process of showing me that you can solve the problem or accomplishing the objective in the question is a demonstration that you understand the material in class, because you have to first understand the question, and that means a certain level of competency. But not only can you relate what the question is asking to the concepts being taught in class, but you can actually apply those things that you have learned in class to solve the problem, to achieve a certain objective. So that's the second part of the component that is really important. Performance refers to, can you do it within the certain time frame? Now this is also important, because I have had a lot of people telling me, if I had more time, I can do this. Well, performance, how quickly people can solve a problem, is a part of what is being assessed. I am not doing it in a sense that I am making it competitive. I'm not saying only the people who can get this done, the quickest time to find a solution is an A, and then and then from there we get to B's and C's, and oh, I am sorry, but if you can only do this after this much time, you're going to get a D or an F. It's not quite like that. I would assume a certain amount of time to solve a problem, and people just have to do it within that time frame. So it's not competitive in the sense that people who can do it the fastest is going to get the highest grade, and so on. Now, what if sometimes I underestimate the difficulty of a question, and the entire class can only finish 4 out of 5 questions? Well, in that case, I rescale everything. So I just upscale. I take the maybe the third highest score in the class, and call that 100%, and then just rescale the score of the entire class to that new number. So that will take care of the problem of sometimes I may make some questions longer, and I underestimate how much time it will take to solve those problems, because I would just look at the overall performance of the class, take the third highest score of a 30 people class, and then just say that, well, I'm going to use that as the new 100% and rescale everybody up to that. All right, so those are the things that I am looking for in an assessment, basically an exam. So the way I assign scores is easy. Okay, for every criterion of every single question, there's a number going from 0 to 4. And you might notice that 0 is in GPA, an F, and 4 in GPA is an A. In other words, I scale everything back to the GPA scale. So now the question is, what is a 0 out of 4? And this is an example of what qualifies to get a 0 out of 4. I mean, the first one is really obvious. No work is submitted. Okay, well, I have no evidence whatsoever of whether the person who took the test understand the material or not. Or in the case that something is turned in, I do not find any evidence of the ability to analyze and think critically, and the ability to synthesize or problem solve, referring back to these 2 points here. What about 1 out of 4? How is that different? Well, first of all, there's submitted work. It shows some but insufficient. Okay, so the key word here is insufficient evidence of those 2 things that I mentioned, and also maybe the efficiency do not. So the efficiency does not matter in this case. What about a 2 out of 4? A 2 out of 4 is different from a 1 out of 4 because the submitted work shows sufficient evidence of the ability to analyze and the ability to synthesize, but at the same time, there are certain mistakes. Okay, so there's some conceptual mistakes despite showing sufficient evidence of the understanding of the problem, but there are certain mistakes made and or insufficient familiarity or efficiency. So so a C basically boils down to there are omissions. There may be maybe half of the question is answered, or the answer contains just a lot of errors. They're not the core concept or the understanding of the core concept is demonstrated, but there are also a lot of mistakes in terms of solving the problem. A 3 out of 4 or B means the submitted work provides sufficient evidence of blah blah blah, but it also shows evidence of one or more operational instead of conceptual mistakes and or omissions. So one has to do with conceptual mistakes or omissions, and then the other one is operational. The difference between conceptual versus operational is one means there's a misunderstanding of something. The other one is basically someone made an error, just a careless mistake or an omission of something. And possibly, a B also means that there's evidence of room for improvement in terms of familiarity and or efficiency. And then an A basically just means that all of the above are met. Okay, there's enough evidence to support the ability to analyze and think critically, the ability to synthesize or problem solve, complete and correct understanding of the material, no mistakes, operational correctness, and that's basically no mistakes, and excellent familiarity and or efficiency. So so that goes back to performance, because familiarity and or efficiency basically is performance. How quickly can someone solve a problem? All right, so there are some arguments about whether performance should be a factor in assessment or not. I'll just push this to an extreme argument and just say that, okay, so if time, the amount of time is not important in an assessment, then we cannot have an end time to an assessment. In other words, I have to basically say, oh, here's an exam, turn it back to me whenever you are done with it. That is not how the UCs or the CSUs or any four-year university going to assign grades or to score exams. There will be a time limit. Okay, so in order for our classes to be quote unquote realistic, meaning that you'll be ready for a four-year university, we're going to use the same way of assessment. It's not going to be open-ended in terms of the amount of time. But more importantly, it has to do with what happens when you're hired. Okay, so when you're hired, except for very, very few employers, most employers are they're very bottom line driven. In other words, they look at how much they pay you, and they look at how much work you're cranking out, and they will basically determine your employment and your salary accordingly. So in the end, the assessment of your when you're employed is going to include performance. It's not just whether you can get something done. It is also going to include how quickly or how efficiently and how competently you can get it done. And so I think it is not unreasonable to include performance as a factor in assessment. And remember, in this case, I'm not going to assign as long as people can get it done within the amount of time, it is okay. I'm not going to rank based on, oh, this person turned in the test 30 minutes ahead of time and this person is going to get a higher score accordingly. Nope, I just need everybody to turn in their answers, within the time frame. That's basically all that I'm asking for. So there's no ranking based on how quickly people turn in their submissions. All right, so in terms of numbers, this is how at the end of the semester, I add up all the points that you have earned and all the points that are possible, and then we get a percentage, we get a ratio. So if that ratio is less than 1/8 or 12.5%, that person is going to get an A. If it is between 1/8 and 2/8, then it's a D, and then from 3/8 to 5/8, it is a C. If it is between 5/8 and 7/8, it is a B, and anyone who gets more than at least 7/8 is going to get a letter grade of A. All right, so moving on to late and makeup policy. Basically, there is none. In order for a submission to count to the final grade, it must be submitted on time. I forgot to write on time here. In certain cases, the instructor may agree to late submissions. The verifiable reason of a late submission should be provided to the instructor prior to the due date, and preferably at the time the assessment is scheduled. The instructor reserves the right not to allow or grade a late submission. In other words, this is all my purview, okay, whether I will allow a late submission or not. And these are specific to an exam. A makeup is possible only if all of the following conditions are satisfied. The instructor agrees to the makeup and the reason of the makeup. The reasons of the makeup are satisfactorily verifiable, and the request of a makeup is prior to the scheduled time date of the exam. So with this one, with 11.3, I can give you a few examples of what I will not be allowing to be used as a reason for late and makeup. Religious reasons would not be accepted. Okay, so that's one. Okay, so I have certain assumptions, that when people look at the schedule of the classes and they say, I'm going to take this class, they have already checked and make sure that they can make it to the class sections. So as such, okay, anything that is other than things that are happening that cannot be accounted for when people sign up for the classes and is legitimate, anything other than that, I will not be making exceptions to the rules of everything has to be turned in on time. So it is a very case-by-case basis, and if people need to talk to me about, can I turn this in late, they will need to talk to me, and then I will make a decision, once I hear the argument. But the thing is, I'm going to evaluate each one case by case. So this one is kind of fuzzy. It is basically just saying that, yeah, in certain cases, I will make exceptions, but those cases has to be, they all have to make sense to me. All right, so more about assessments. What kind of assessments do we have in this class? So homework assignments and lab activities make up 20% of your final grade. There's a first exam and second exam. Each one is a kind of smaller exam, so each one is also 20% of your final grade. And then the final exam is 40% of your final grade. So we have basically 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, and 2/5 of your final score, made up by these 4 different types of assessments. Okay, so after this, there's a topic schedule. Once again, this is specific to each class, and I'm not going to go over that because this video is supposed to be non-class specific. So I think that covers everything. If you do have any questions about anything that we have talked about in this video, just let me know, and I will be more than happy to talk about it. And that's just one reminder that I need to go through again, and that has to do with I am no longer going to offer remote participation as a way to substitute in-person participation. All of my classes are in person. They are already in person on the schedule, so everybody should know that they are expected to be in the classroom on certain days at certain times. So I'm not going to allow remote participation anymore. So that's it. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording and send it to you, and hopefully you can watch this on or before the first day of class.